Good day. Today is Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022. I'm Vaughn Marino, Managing Director at GovConnects and GovConnects Foundation. Welcome to today's event, Government Procurements, Closing the Loop Through Open Records. This webinar is presented by Nick Bernardo. Nick is the founder and president of MyGovWatch. MyGovWatch.com is the government contract bid notification and intelligence website serving users since 2007, with proprietary AI powering its ability to send users leads from more than 200 industries, from professional services to construction to finance and technology and beyond. MyGovWatch not only sends users the right leads, but also offers users so much more through optional add-on services and other ways to connect within the B2G space. If you have questions, please use the chat function and we'll take them at the end of the presentation and during the presentation. Without further ado, here's Nick. Nick, it's all yours.
Vaughn, thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you for everyone logging on this afternoon, if you're here on the East Coast or in the Central Time Zone, and anyone getting ready for lunch in the Western states or maybe in other parts unknown. So thanks for joining us, and especially for anyone who may have been on the session 2 weeks ago where there were some technical difficulties. Thanks for joining us again. I was looking at the list of possible attendees today. I see that there are people who have been in business for a very long time. I see that there are some folks on the line who might be new to government contracting or recently in business. I'm always interested to see how there are people in government who may be on calls like this. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. I'll just say that most of what we're going to be looking at is on my screen. So although I'm not shy, I'm not much to look at, but I just felt it was not really necessary to be on a laptop or a device with the camera. So we're going to mostly be looking at my screen. And I like to have a dialogue when we do sessions like this. So I'm going to encourage you, and I'll ask Vaughn to help me monitor the chat feature so that as questions come up, it's less of a monologue and there can be some back and forth. Don't be shy if it's about your company specifically. I'm sure anything we talk about could be, may benefit other people on the line. So I encourage questions during the session. We're going to look at 5 procurements on this call. And I think by going through each of those, you'll be able to see what some of the opportunities are to gain intelligence about the markets that you're in through the open records process. So we're starting at our website, and everything that you're going to be looking at is on our website at MyGovWatch. And our reason for existence is that it's fundamentally hard to get information about government contracts. So the more experienced government contractors, you know that part of your job is simply knowing what's happening in your space and as it relates to your industry. And so we know that there are different tools out there where people get their leads. We're one of those tools. There are certainly tools out there that are between $8,000 and $10,000 per year just to hear about the lead. There are also free tools. We feel we are right-sizing this market. Our national subscription plan is $80 per month. Regional is $50 a month. And if you just want to hear about leads in one state, it's free. So we find that there's a lot of value there compared to what the PTACs offer and some of the free or paid services that they offer. And so before we get into the content, the last thing I'll say is that anyone who creates an account on MyGovWatch and starts a 14-day trial and forwards the email that you started the trial to sales@MyGovWatch today, sales@MyGovWatch.com, you'll get credits on the site, free credits on the site that you can use to access procurements and information about the industries that you're in. So I'm just going to hide this, and now I'm logged into the site. And Vaughn, you'll stop me if I'm talking about something that you can't see. Yes?
Yes, I will be happy to.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the open records laws across the country, which enable you to see why the winners of different RFPs are winning those contracts. And by seeing that, it will help your chances of winning future bids. You're going to learn why you lost, which will also help you with future procurements that you may be participating in. You're going to learn about how your competitors price different deals, which improves your future win rate and your pricing. There may be some cases where you earn even more money, Or there may be other cases where seeing pricing on other similar bids talks you out of bidding on certain contracts, which will save you staff time and your own time as well. So I always like leaving it open on calls like this to talk about dispelling misconceptions about government contracting. So this is really for anyone on the call who might be newer to government contracting. So there are lots of misconceptions out there about government procurement. And as you think of those, I welcome you to send a chat and we'll talk about any questions that you have. What we found is that 2/3, especially in the service industry, 2/3 of procurements are real opportunities. So over time, we have researched hundreds of RFPs in this process. And what we found is when it's a service opportunity in particular, and when it's an existing contract where they have a service provider, we find that 2/3 of those are real. And here's how we define a real opportunity. 1/3 of the 100%, they just stuck with the incumbent. So they just did it for procedural reasons. They really didn't want to do a bid process. They just had to do it because of the rebidding laws that are present in each state. But the other 2/3 are real opportunities because they either replace the incumbent, or they never bought that service before, or they were able to hire multiple companies for an opportunity in what you would refer to as a multiple award contract. And some of the folks who are experienced government contractors on the line are well familiar with that term. So we're going to talk a little bit about open records now and just a background on open records before we look at a particular contract. And so what are open records? An open record is a public record that is public by its very nature. In other words, it's not public because my company obtained a copy of it. It's not public because you may obtain a copy of it. It's public by its very nature, and it's incumbent upon people to exercise their right to get information on documents that are public documents. And I just want to make a distinction between a document and a piece of information. So the open records laws at the federal level and at the state level, they are the intention of those is to give you access to documents, not to give you information. And that's an important distinction because it's not your right as a citizen to call any government official and ask questions. They have no obligation to answer your questions. However, if you follow the right process, and if the information you're looking for lives in a document, then you're entitled to that document. So at the federal level, we have what's called the Freedom of Information Act. But then at the state level, there are different versions of that, and each state has its own version. Here in New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia, we have the Oprah law, not to be confused with the celebrity. That's the Open Public Records Access Law. Then we have over the other side of the river in Pennsylvania, the Right to Know law. We have FOIA, or the Freedom of Information Law. That's in New York. In Florida, we have the Sunshine Law. So if you're joining us from the Sunshine State, you will be happy to know that your state has a very liberal open records law, meaning you can get access to just about anything with very few exceptions. So most states also have an ombudsman or an appeal group. So if you make an open records request to learn about a contracting opportunity and you don't get the effort or the process is not being followed correctly, you can search on ombudsman for open records or appeal group for open records, and you'll be able to find someone. There are a few outlier states. And so there are states like Arkansas, Montana, Tennessee, Texas, and the like, where you have to be a citizen of that state, meaning you have to show them a driver's license or they can ignore you. You have the state of Texas, where every open records request, whether it's having to do with a state contract or a small municipal contract or a school district contract, they are required to go to the state attorney general and get feedback on that so that the attorney general can advise them on what they should release. In Virginia, the other exception being if you're a media organization or an attorney, then you can have access to that information. So what are some exceptions to open records? So we talked about how any document that the government possesses is fundamentally an open record. Well, as it turns out, there are reasonable exceptions to that type of thing. So for example, if there is a nuclear power facility that's operated by a government agency, you will not get schematics on their buildings or their IT infrastructure, for example. If there's a personnel file on a government employee, a police officer, or another government employee, you will not have access to their HR records. You will not have access to any home address information or personally identifiable information about individuals in government. And how does that relate to procurements? So in the context of procurements, there are some exceptions. And the interesting thing is that they are able to withhold certain things, but they don't always do it. And that's what's really interesting. So in certain states, government agencies are able to withhold what they call deliberative materials. So what we mean by that, that could be an email between Nancy and John, where Nancy says, I think we should hire company A and give the contract to them. And I think we should do that because they're 2 miles away from the building and they have these other attributes. And John might say, well, I sort of agree with you, but I think we should give it to this other company for these other reasons. So in certain states, they can withhold emails like that for evaluation documents that might contain that sort of what they call deliberative material. We also have trade secrets. So when we do an open records request, we are always asking for copies of the winning proposals. And so there are trade secret issues at the state level. The state law may carve out exceptions if the private party whose proposal is being requested, if there's trade secret information, there's often a process where they can redact things like their financial statements or resumes of employees or things like that. But just like anything else, human nature and bureaucracies being what they are, what we found is even when we tell the government agencies that we're not interested in trade secrets and they can withhold those, a lot of times the person fulfilling the request will just send us everything and they may go beyond what they're supposed to give us. So we have actually successfully sued the federal government over a FOIA issue. They wouldn't even give us for an open records request once a list of the companies that bid on a contract. And that's just an example of how far you can go with this sort of thing. And a federal judge looked at it and said, just give them the document. So you can have success using legal resources if it's worth the investment in that resource. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at 5 RFPs over the next 45 minutes, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges associated with the process, because everything we're going to look at on this call is a public record. You can get access to this information. Well, why do people have us do it? Well, first off, they're already getting their leads from our site, and there's a button on the site that you'll see that lets you buy credits on the site and just tell us, go get the results of this RFP. It's very easy. And so the challenges and the reasons why they would offload that to us is that it's time consuming. So it's not just one phone call or one email. Typically, you're going to make 6 to 10 phone calls and send 3 or 4 emails until the right person actually follows up with you to the point where they give you any information whatsoever. There's also obstinance. And so a lot of times the companies bidding on contracts, you would not want to be the company applying pressure to get the information, because if you want to sell to that government agency in the future, they can just make it a little bit hard for you to get the information. And human nature being what it is, it may be very difficult for you to win contracts in that jurisdiction. So in addition to getting leads from us every month, what our users do is they say, you know what, go get the information, doesn't cost that much, and I can be anonymous in respect of that opportunity. So I'm just going to stop there, Vaughn, before we jump into the first contract and see if there are any questions.
There was one question, and that's somebody wanted the slides. I explained to them these are in real time, and they can get a copy of the recording if they email me at Vaughn, V-A-U-N-E, @govconnects.com.
Absolutely. And so because this is being recorded, that is what would be shared. There is no slide deck. It's just all real-time data off of our site. And what I tried to do in picking the opportunities that we would look at, I tried to pick things that were all over the country. I also tried to pick things that were product-oriented, and I tried to pick things that were service-oriented. There's a little bit of IT here. There's some business process outsourcing. There's product, and there's construction. So the first opportunity that I wanted to look at has to do with interpreter services. And this is an RFP that was out in 2020 for as-needed telephone interpreter services for various DMV field offices. So one of our users reached out and said, hey, I would like the results of this opportunity. So after we were able to obtain those, and after the user was informed that these documents were available for download, I looked at this and said, hey, this would be one that would present well in a teleseminar. And you can see what we were able to obtain. So number one, a copy of the contract. And that's so important. And why? You may be selling this service or similar services to the state of California. You would love to see what their default contract looks like. Or if you're in an interpreting company, you would like to see how is that contract structured in your industry as it relates to the state of California. The winning proposal we're going to take a look at, or actually we're going to look at a losing proposal in this case. But in this case, we were able to get the losing and the winning proposals and tabulations and award documents showing pricing and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is just go to this first document, and Vaughn, you'll tell me if you can see a PDF. Vaughn, are you on mute?
Yes, I do see it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
U.S. Department of Motor Vehicles, Notice of Contract Award.
Okay, good. And I'm
When
just
you're
gonna
done with that, I have a couple of questions too.
Okay, and just based on the questions, does it make sense to take them now or wait until after we talk about this RFP?
Let's talk about the RFP.
Okay. All right. So for this opportunity, we were able to obtain a list of the bidders and the pricing. So what does it cost for a call center company to take phone calls where the DMV is having trouble communicating with an individual? And it turns out, in this case, it costs anywhere from $196,000 to $302,000. And what was very interesting about this one, there's a misconception in government contracting that the low bidder wins. Well, that's simply not true. Now, that does happen, but it tends to happen when it is announced as a part of the bid process. So if the government agency says we're going to pick the lowest responsible and responsive and responsible bidder, you can bet your life that they will pick the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Now, let's just talk about what that means. You can be responsive, meaning you followed all of the steps of the bid process, but not responsible, meaning you don't have enough experience or your financials show that you're upside down and they just don't want to do business with you for that reason. Or you can be responsible, meaning you've been in this business for 30 years and your financials are great, but you're non-responsive. You didn't do something right in the bid process. And I just wanted to, and you can hopefully see me moving my mouse, key in on the two asterisks here for telelanguage and Excel interpreting. And I wanted to look at those and just see if I can hide this. Well, that'll be okay. So in this case, one of the companies, I think it was Excel Interpreting. Let's just see here. Yes, Excel Interpreting. There were two things. There was a certain document that needed to be submitted as a part of the bid process. And let me just find that document. And that document was a certification. So this is Exhibit G of the RFP package. And in that certification, they wanted you to certify certain things about your interpreters, the number of languages you speak, what are the minimum qualifications of an interpreter, and they wanted you to sign this certification. And as a part of the certification, they wanted you to certify that you have an office in the state of California. And so what we found out from this one is that Excel Interpreting, imagine spending 3 or 4 days writing a bid response. They simply did not submit Exhibit G. And so whatever staff time they spent on this, unfortunately, they could not be awarded because they did not certify the minimum requirements of the bid. In the other case, and let me just go to the correct page here, page 17. And this is one of the proposals submitted. We're going to look at other examples of that. So I'm just going to draw your attention to the bold section right here, the second paragraph. We understand the importance of the qualification, principal place of business in California. So they're saying we're in Oregon, but we have interpreters in California. We have accounts in the state. We do business with the state already. And unfortunately, they were not responsive, meaning they do not meet the minimum requirement, meaning you must have your principal place of business in the state of California. So the experienced bidders on the call will know that should be expected, because the greatest opportunity to have a protest in a public bid is to not follow your own minimum requirements. So only by doing an open records request can some companies who might be less familiar with these ideas learn that you should not bid on a contract if you do not meet a requirement, unless you go into it knowing, this is probably going to be rejected, but I still would like to submit a document anyway. But in this case, they were never going to win because they didn't meet that minimum requirement. And it looks like they went into it knowing that, and for business reasons, they said, you know what, we'll just submit something. They were actually the low bidder, but that was not good enough to carry the day. They went with HANA interpreting service. So I'm just going to stop right there, Vaughn, and let's just see what questions there are.
Okay, we have a few questions here right now. First one is from Carolyn, and it's, what is the first step in the FOIA process?
So specifically, and thank you for that question, specifically as it relates to FOIA, what you want to do is identify the documents that would contain the information that you're seeking. So if it's a bid process, that's very easy. You're going to want the contract, you're going to want the winning proposal, you're going to want evaluations, you're going to want pricing data, and you're going to want any and all documents related to the procurement that are not exempt. If it's not related to a procurement, and I'll just spend a minute on that, you have to ask yourself, what documents would have this information? So if you're looking for information on a construction project that's not related to a procurement, you're just interested in it, you must be able to identify that thing. So the government is not required to make documents just to give you information. The documents must already exist for the government to give you those documents. And so you want to identify the documents that you need first, make a list of those, and then identify who is the correct party to receive the request. And in some cases, you can just send it to the buyer and they forward it. In other cases, they'll ignore you because they're not the custodian anymore. It's not their responsibility. And it's also not their responsibility to help you figure out who is responsible. So if they ignore you, then you're going to be Googling around and looking for a law department in the government agency, or you're going to be looking for an open records department or a public access department. And then finally, you have to determine the method of submitting the request. That could be an email, or it could be an online form, or in rare cases, it could be a physical letter. It will not be over the phone. So the easiest one would be an email that clearly says, this is what I want, and list out those things. The more specific you are, the better bookends you put around it, the better your chances of getting responsive information. So I'm going to stop there and see if that answers the question, and if there's another.
There is another, and a couple others. Does GovWatch process FOIA requests free of charge, or for each RFQ requested?
Great question. I wish we had tens of thousands of people doing it, but we have certain parameters around that. You're generally buying credits and then applying those credits to tell us and go get the information. So I think for a state contract, I forget the number of credits, but I think it works out to somewhere between $100 and $150 in terms of credit to have us go do that. And then on the state side, I think it goes up to above $200. Federal is more expensive, it's much more involved, and there's a less chance of success. But we're not automatically doing it, we're doing it on demand for users that are getting leads from us.
Okay, that sounds fair. Does GovWatch also process federal contract requests?
Absolutely. And so we know that you can see most or all federal procurement opportunities on the federal website. But a differentiator or why someone would use us is that our tools for notifying you are not only far less expensive than the biggest companies in our industry, they're also much better value than free tools that you might have access to at a regional SBA office. And so, yes, we are serving up federal leads, and we're using artificial intelligence to understand not only what your business is and what industries you're in, because we have 204 industries that we're tracking, but making sure using NAICS codes and understanding the language that's used in the bid documents and on the website and the title of the RFP, which one should you hear about? So yes.
Okay, we have another question, and this is, how often are mental health and or substance abuse RFPs reported and posted?
I think we see those all the time. I would be hard pressed to give you a number, but I'm certain that we have a category, one of our 204 categories, that is tailored along those lines, because I remember seeing it. I just don't have all of the categories memorized.
I have one more question. How and where to find interpreter translation contracts at?
Oh, so we have someone on the line who does interpreting. So there are lots of applications for interpreting, and I just remember reading about this one, and it caused me to do a little bit more research, but we see them federally, and we also see them at the state and local center, because anytime there's a call center, like a DMV call center, they need to be able to interact with different members of the public, regardless of whether or not they're citizens or whether or not they speak English. So that would be at the state level, at the county level, and at the federal level. I don't know if I've seen any at the municipal level, although there might be some written interpretation work at that level. And I know that there's written interpretation work at the state and federal level as well.
Okay, you ready for one last question?
Yes.
Can I possibly get an RFP related to to OP facilities for mental health?
I think we're just getting a little bit too specific here. So what I would say to this person, thank you for your question. You can contact me directly after this call, and what I'll do is I'll put my personal information up on the screen, and you can get to me through Vaughn as well. And so we can start a conversation that's one-on-one.
That sounds great. That's all for right now.
Okay, so the second RFP that I wanted to look at, this is a construction contract, and this was in Seminole County, Florida. And I just wanted to spend a moment and show people the interface for ordering OpenRecs Access, which is the name of the product. So assuming you're a construction company, in this case, you might have bid on this and you want the results to it, you can simply find the OpenRecs Access button here and order and use some of your credits to tell us to get the results of the opportunity. So in this case, this is a test account, and this test account has 808 credits, and you can just purchase for 60 of the credits. And then immediately, if we have the documents already, because some other user ordered us to do it, they're immediately available. And you know that before you even order. You can see the names of the documents if we already have them. If we do not have them, then it may take a few months to get them. So in this case, we're going to look at this construction opportunity, and I just wanted to take a look at how this RFP was evaluated, and I just need to remind myself of where these documents were. I'll just click on them again. So for the scoring documents, go to that. I wanted to key in on how there were different folks that were scoring the RFP. And in this case, we have scoring documents from, it looks like, 5 different people. And we just don't have time to look through each one. But when I looked at the first 4 here, it occurred to me that there was very little information on how each of these evaluators viewed the bids. And I think there were 2 bids. As it turns out, this person, Nicholas Brow, he really put more thought into the scoring process. And probably they just said, look, we're just going to, give a rudimentary review of this. We want your evaluation to carry the day. And so this is just paperwork that they had to fill in order to document that they followed the process for evaluations. And so there were two companies that submitted offers on this opportunity. There was Wharton Smith, and there was the Collage companies. And so Wharton Smith was the winning company. And I know you're just seeing this, so I'm just going to use my cursor to show. This is the Collage companies. And when you start looking at the evaluation, and this is how detailed it can become, you can see if they provided very detailed information about your company and what they thought about your company, and very detailed information about your competitors, depending on what information is available. And I thought it was very interesting because there was a very tight scoring difference between the two companies. It looks like what carried the day was this one evaluator's comment that the design builder and AOR lacked recent experience. And he gave it a marginal good rating, and he scored it 30 out of 40 points. And then the organization, they got 34 out of 40 points. And so then when you look at the winning company, they got a 38 on the design and construction experience, and the organization and management qualification section, they got a 38 as well, compared to 30 and 34. So what is the point? The point here is that these open records documents will tell you specifically who are the people that are involved in the decisions to buy your product or service. So in this case, here are the people that will be involved in construction projects at this buyer. And then you can surmise what is important to the people through their evaluation documents and what they're saying. In this case, you can just look and see that this individual cared about a few things more than anything else. So certainly you can use that if you're pitching construction services to Seminole County, Florida. And that was the purpose of why I picked this opportunity. And before we go further, just pull up this document. I think I already have it here. Okay, bear with me. There it is. So in this case, we're able to see an actual copy of the winning proposal. And I wanted to just show you that because so many people are submitting electronic documents these days, this is the original electronic file that the company submitted. And so what is the benefit of that? Okay, so this gives you insight into very detailed information about what your companies are saying and what they're doing in their proposal. So for example, maybe you sell to construction companies. How would you like to have a research tool or a way to find out who are all of the key people that buy your product or service in the private sector? So if you're selling to government contractors, there are things like org charts or resumes that will tell you who are all the people that you should be selling to. And here's just an example of that. You can use it for recruiting purposes. So you may be looking to hire people and it's very competitive in your market. So open records documents give you ideas on who are the kind of people that you might approach to hire, and you may not need a recruiter at that point. So there are, as you look through these documents, and this is a 73-page document, there are just lots and lots of things that you may see that might help you understand your market better, a specific competitor better, or what you need to do with your company to be or remain competitive. So I'll stop there, Vaughn, and let's just see what questions there may be.
Okay, we did get a few questions. Hang on a second. Any IDIQ technology contracts?
I am sure we have indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity IT contracts in our system. I do not know if we have open records results on any of those because it depends on a user ordering that. So, that's a conversation we can have offline, but it's a capability we have. So anything that's on SAM.gov, we can try to get the results for you.
All right, and we have another question. What state, city, county level offices, departments shall we approach for interpretation translation contracts?
So that would also be a one-off question, and I would encourage a one-on-one conversation with me after the call. But if you create an account at MyGovWatch.com, it'll ask you to put in your credit card, and it starts you on a 14-day trial. And then you can see where those opportunities are. And then at the end of that trial, you can cancel if you decide it's not for you. And as long as you do it in the 14 days, you won't be charged. And then you still get a free account. And that free account gives you access to one state and your market. So for free, once a week, we will send you those leads in that state.
Wow, that sounds great. That's all the questions I have right now.
Okay. All right, we're going to look at a third opportunity. And this is Macomb County, Michigan. And so this is the one-time purchase of traffic control barricades and cones. So this is for the product people out there. I guess, you know, translation services are not really glamorous. Construction services, maybe they're glamorous, maybe they're not. But I don't know how exciting traffic control barricades and cones are. I just know that government agencies buy an awful lot of them. And we're just going to look at this one. The reason why I picked this one out, I picked it out for two reasons. First, I picked it out because it helps you understand at a detailed level the pricing difference among different companies for different products. So especially if you're selling products, it's very helpful to understand what is your price point for a very specific product versus your competitors. And without delving too much into what you see here, if you start to look at this, you find out that for reasons that are not knowable, certain companies that are selling these kinds of products are able to offer a much lower price than another company. And I'll just look at line number 18, plastic drum with diamond grade DG3 reflective stripes for each. It's just very interesting to me that there was a price range of $170 down to $77 among 5 different companies. And that is a swing of more than 100%, probably 130 to 140%. And that was very interesting to me because the open records process shows you, are you operating in a market where the price spread is very wide or very narrow? And this may be the only way you can see that, particularly if you sell in the private sector and the public sector. Using public sector data is a tremendously valuable way of knowing your competition and what the prices are that you can then use in the private sector where you would just never know that. The other thing I wanted to talk about in relation to this opportunity, let me just go back to this, see if I can hide that. I wanted to talk about how winning proposals contain contact information for leads. So when you order an open records request and you get the winning proposals and the losing proposals, if you ask for those, lots of times those will contain names and phone numbers and email addresses of other people who purchased that product or service. And so in this case, this company also sells these kinds of products to the Missouri Department of Transportation, a private construction company, and the Kansas Department of Transportation. So that kind of information is available, and those are real leads. And so that is also something that I wanted to point out in respect of this procurement. And I'll stop there, Vaughn, and see what questions there are.
Okay, we have one more question. And this is, where would you request the open record documents from? Well, I would request them from you, but.
Well, thank you for that, Vaughn. So again, this is public information. You first need to identify what are the documents that you're asking for. Then you need to identify who is the person at that government agency who can help you. So if it's in the state of California, you wouldn't just go to the state government. If it's a procurement having to do with a county or a municipality or a school district, you would be going to that entity. You'd be going to the school district, or you'd be going to the county or the municipality. Then once you identify the person you're going to and the entity that you're going to and the documents that you're asking for, you need to identify the process that they use. It's never going to be a phone call. Typically, it could be an email. And then in some cases, it could be an online form or some other written process. It will never be an oral process. For your tracking purposes, you need to make it a written process.
That's the only question I have right now.
Okay. In some cases on the site, we have, and this is a service contract, in some cases on the site, we may have the past information for a recurring service contract, and then a new iteration of that opportunity comes out. So this has to do with the collection of medical accounts that are owed to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada, which is a government agency because it's affiliated with the university. And I would also say that anything that's quasi-government funded probably falls under the open records laws. So just because it's a university or a utility company, don't assume that you can't get this information, because if it's publicly owned, for example, PGW is the gas company in the city of Philadelphia. It doesn't sound like a public entity, but it is. And this is another case like that. And so in this example, you can use past information to determine whether or not you would like to bid on this contract. And so what you're able to do, and let me just open up a new tab here. And so these are documents that we have from 2019, that if you're bidding on this contract now, you can just look back and see what is available. And so in this case, you're able to see detailed scoring matrices that show each company that bid on the contract, who was disqualified, and see where were the scoring areas that people lost the most points. So if there are bid writers on the phone, imagine being able to get access and see where are people gaining and losing the most points. I also wanted to take a look at the winning proposal in this opportunity and use this as another opportunity to let you see what are some things that you can learn about the competition. So this is also a case where the state in question, Nevada, has a very liberal open records law. So people have told us that they use these documents for things like keeping tabs on the competition, even understanding the financial position of their competitors. So in this case, I remember that there were financial documents here, which are not always disclosable. Sometimes they are. In Nevada, they're disclosable. So we were able to see copies of financial statements for this opportunity. And so here, here are detailed financial statements. And imagine being able to see what's going on with your competitors and seeing their balance sheets and their P&Ls to learn, is this a company that you should be competing against? Is this a company that you might want to buy? And so all of that is available if this kind of information is accessible through the Open Records Act. You're also able to see in these open records requests what is happening with contract fees versus proposed fees. And let me just see here. And so I think the pricing for this contractor in the proposal was different than the pricing that actually made it into the contract. And so when you get a copy of the contract, you can also often see what prices were submitted versus the prices that actually made it into the contract. And so in this case, what they submitted was a little bit different than what made it into the contract. So that tells you that this is a government agency that is going to negotiate with you, and they're not just going to take whatever pricing they put in your proposal. What we also often see, and there are many people on this call who are probably familiar with this term, a BAFO process or a best and final offer process. So if a BAFO is part of a procurement, and for those of you who may be new to government contracting, you submit prices and you submit your offer, and then they come back to you in a month or a few weeks and say, we like your bid, but we want everybody to sharpen their pencil and submit their best and final offer, i.e. go a little bit lower than you submitted. And what we found is that it's really just a shakedown. They're not always using that to pick the vendor. They're sometimes using that to just lower the price of the vendor they were going to pick anyway. And if there's a BAFO process, they would give you that as a result of your open records request. And so those are some of the things that I wanted to talk about as it relates to this particular procurement. Vaughn? And I think you're still on mute, Vaughn.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. There are no new questions.
Okay. Okay, and we're just going to look at one more contract. And this is something back on the East Coast in New England. This is for IT help desk support. And I wanted to look at something specific for this one having to do with how pricing factors into other factors in a scoring on what they refer to as a value-based bid. And so I wanted to take a look at this scoring document as a part of that. And here it is. So for this particular contract, there were 5 bidders. And you can see they were using a 100-point scale. So every bid was assigned a scale or a score from 0 to 100. And you can see how those shake out from 84 points to 28 points for the lowest scoring bidder. And so it's very useful, especially for companies out there that are selling services or where service is a component. It's very useful to see a matrix like this, because only by seeing this, you understand what is the relationship between financial and non-financial factors in the award. You can see what was the technical proposal worth. Well, in this case, it was worth 45 points. What was availability worth? It was worth 20 points. The service level agreements, 15 points. Implementation, 10 points. And then you can cross-reference that with the winning proposal and see, why did Blackboard Incorporated get 39 of the 45 points? And why did EHR Concepts only get 13 of those 45 points? And you'd be able to see that if you get the winning and losing proposal. But what's really interesting in terms of pricing is a lot of times, because people have this misconception that pricing is driving the bus and the only reason why government agencies pick the lowest bidder, or that's why they pick the lowest bidder, it's useful to see this because you can see that that is simply not the case, and that you can be the low bidder and not get the award. You cannot be the low bidder and get the award. If pricing is only 10 points out of the total of 100, pricing is certainly important. You don't want to be the highest price all the time, but it doesn't necessarily matter whether or not you were the low bidder. So it looks like iTodd LLC was the low bidder. So they got the most pricing points, but they only got 28 technical points. They only got 15 availability points, and they did pretty well in the 2 other areas. So they were the highest scoring company, or a high scoring company, on 3 of the 5 areas. They got all of the points available to them in A3 and A4, and they got the highest number of points in A5, but these 2 areas cost them. So you can see if your proposal is the problem. And clearly in this case, iTodd LLC's proposal was the problem. And so that's what that I wanted to talk about in relation to this RFP, Vaughn. And we sort of zoomed through this, no pun intended. Last time we had so many technical problems, we had to reschedule, and we have a bunch of new folks on the line. So I was able to get through everything in 50 minutes, Vaughn, and that's great.
That's
and
awesome.
I think we can take some questions. And I think what I'll also do is put my contact information here. So you can just jot that down, and Vaughn, you can share this with anyone you'd like.
I'm
But
doing it
let's just,
now.
yeah, let's just see if there are are other questions. And these can be general questions. They don't have to be about government contract, or they don't have to be about open records. We're actually getting ready to launch a weekly or bi-weekly call where we just talk about bid requirements and help people figure out if they'd like to bid on different contracts. So that's something we're going to be starting to do. So we're going to be marketing that to people that have accounts on our site. So the easiest way to hear about that is to at least create the free account, go through the trial process. If you're not sure whether you want to stay a paid user, you can always downgrade. And then at least you'll hear about the bi-weekly open call that we're planning on having starting in, I think, March. So this has been great. Are there questions around anything other than open records as it relates to government contracting on the procurement side?
Any new questions? What's Nick's website address?
Well, I should type that down also.
You should.
So it's www.MyGovWatch.com. And so there are lots of people on this call who probably have a bid notification service. When you start pricing us out versus everyone else, you'll see that the low-end tools are just not as slick and as useful as ours. And you'll see that you could be getting the very same leads for a lot less. And because we have this low-cost model, you can sign up for our site, evaluate us versus who you're using now, and you might stop paying that bill next year. Anyone can feel free to chime in if they'd like to use their audio and unmute yourself. We can take questions that way also.
We do have a question. Is NetGain for Results a separate entity than MyGovWatch?
No, MyGovWatch.com is a wholly owned subsidiary of NetGain Marketing Incorporated, which was the original name of the original name of the company, but MyGovWatch.com does business under that name. And
you get a compliment. Thank you. Well done.
Oh, well, that's great. I'd like to say that I've done a lot of these over the years. Again, I should probably get a laptop just for this one, because I know, everyone has the expectation of video these days. Yep. Probably I should upgrade and have that ready for the next one.
Great. So I am putting this up. Anybody who wants to get a copy of the recording can please email me at Vaughan, V-A-U-N-E, at govconnects.com. I've put it in the chat several times. And are there any other questions? Oh, we have one. Are there, let's see. Are there emergency gov contracts related to the Ukraine yet? I guess yet is implied.
So here's what I would say about that. If there are needs related to the Ukraine, I would not be qualified to set parameters around what all those needs would be. I would say this. I would say that when there's an emergency need, all the rules go out the window, and the federal government can do what it needs to do. And there does not need to be a bid process under emergency circumstances, because sometimes these federal procurements can take a year. And so in the case of federal disaster recovery, or certainly COVID, if you look up federal, there's probably articles out there about federal purchasing around COVID. They were just able to throw a lot of those rules out the window. Then, and what I would say to you is that if you sell something that you think has some bearing on that conflict or on that situation, you want to find out what is the agency that would be buying that product or service, and just start calling around for what may be needed, and they may not need to do a bid at all. And so the premise of our site is there is a bid and it's a procurement, and they need to follow a process. I would also say, for those of you that are new to government contracting at the state and local level, they have thresholds for what requires a bid. So even if it's not an emergency situation, under a certain amount, they do not have to do a bid process. So if you sell certain products or services that are low cost in nature, they're able to just buy off of you without a bid process. No one has to do a bid process to buy 2 or 3 office chairs, for example. They can just buy them.
All right, I think that wraps it up for today.
Vaughn, this has been great. Thank you so much. And
I
please send me the
enjoyed it.
recording as well.
All right,
Yep.
great. I will do that.
Great
If
call.
you stop sharing, I can probably end the event.
Okay, let me do that.
Vaughn?
Bye, everyone.